So I'll start this off by saying today was a good day. So I'm kind of just recording this to explain something. Um, Today was good in the sense I was studying all day, and when I get done with this, I'll keep studying. But so, Sunday, I'll explain this really quickly, and then I'll get to what I wanted to talk about for this video journal entry thing. Um, Saturday, I did that video, and um, it really did explain a lot, and uh, it definitely not all of it. And hopefully, at some point, I can go back and rewatch it and answer questions that I would have if I was someone who didn't know all the details. Do that in a video entry. But Sunday was an okay day. Spent about 2.25 hours on the phone with one of my best friends, and it made Sunday a pretty great day, even though it had been pretty crap the rest of the time. Just hadn't been feeling great, like physically. Mentally, I was okay, but physically, it wasn't okay. And then I got to talk with them on the phone for a while, and it made things better. So, and then, like I said, today's been a great day so far. I mean, I've been running back and forth between where I am now in my very messy room, but running between here and the campus, which is just like a minute and a half down the road. So, anyway, I was watching topic at hand, what I'm going to use this time to talk about. I was watching some videos, and while this is not something that has been medically declared, I have definitely found myself showing signs of what's called borderline personality disorder. And it's from the stuff I'm going to read and kind of explain how it applies to me. Mine's definitely a more rare type. It's not a typical borderline personality, because like these, there's 9 tips to showing identifying it. So the 9 symptoms basically of BPD, and some of these I have seen myself do. Some of these I haven't, like number 5, definitely not, and number 4 to a very small extent, but I'll get there at that point when we get there. But some of these things, and the reason why I'm going to explain how they've applied, is because some of these things can be very intense and very severe, like symptoms. Some of these are very obvious in some people, but for me, they're much less because either one, I'm an incredible actor, or I just haven't progressed enough in it, or it's just I've got a rare type. Anyway, basically, BPD, it's the best way to put it. It's a personality disorder, so it's not like a mood disorder like bipolar, or it's not like a physical disorder, if that makes any sense. But basically, there's a couple questions you can ask yourself if they apply to you. So this article says, do you identify with any of the following statements? I often feel empty. My emotions shift very quickly, and I often experience extreme sadness, anger, or anxiety. I'm constantly afraid that people I care about will abandon or leave me. I would describe most of my romantic relationships as intense but unstable. The way I feel about people in my life can dramatically change from one moment to the next, and I don't always understand why. I often do the things that I know are dangerous or unhealthy, such as driving recklessly, in addition to other things. I've attempted to hurt myself, engage in self-harm behaviors such as cutting, or threaten suicide. And when I'm feeling insecure in a relationship, I tend to lash out and make impulsive gestures to keep the other person close. A lot of those are like very on the severe side of things, and I'll get to how each of them applies to me. But basically, the 9 symptoms, just really quickly. Symptom 1 is fear of abandonment. Number 2 is unstable relationships. 3 is unclear or shifting self-image. 4 is impulsive, self-destructive behaviors. 5 is self-harm. 6 is extreme emotional swings. 7 is chronic feelings of emptiness. 8 is explosive anger. And 9 is feeling suspicious or out of touch with reality. I guess the best thing I can do is kind of go through how each of them applies, because there are some like number 8. If anyone watching this, if they know me well enough, I don't get angry unless it's something very severe. So number 8 does not apply to me. I do not have a short temper, and I've only been mad enough to actually be obviously mad like 3 or 4 times in recent times. I say recent, like in the past 5 or so years. Now I can't say I have been upset, but I've never been mad or like truly angry, except for a few times in the past bit. But anyway, back to number 1. So number 1 again is fear of abandonment, and I'll just read how this says and kind of show how it applies to me. So for most people with BPD, they're often terrified of being abandoned or left alone. Even something as innocuous as a loved one arriving home late from work or going away for the weekend may cause intense fear. This can prompt frantic efforts to keep the other person close. You may beg, cling to, start fights, or track your loved one's movements, or even physically block the person from leaving. Unfortunately, this behavior does tend to have the opposite effect, driving others away. So for me, this is one of those that's kind of weird for me, because it's kind of a double-edged sword, at least on my end. With the friends that I have, I do find myself some days being genuinely worried that one day they're just going to wake up and come to their senses and like, why am I friends with this dude? Because I'm not the best person. So I'm surprised that the friends I have are so kind and wonderful to me, even though I haven't really done anything to deserve it. Anyway, that being said, I don't really worry as much about being abandoned in that sense. Like I worry that like one day I'm going to wake up and I just straight up don't have anybody to talk to, don't have any friends. But I'm never worried enough about it that it's inhibiting. Like for some people with BPD, they will, like I said, you'll beg, cling, start fights, track your loved one's movements, or even physically block the person from leaving. One of the videos that I watched literally says that, and this kind of coincides with the later ones, you'll go to dramatic effects to try and keep someone near. And I can't say that I've done that, because at this point I haven't. But I do have a fear that one day I'll wake up one day and just don't have any friends, but I'm never afraid. Well, actually, let me amend that. There are times, especially recently, given the fact that, I've had these issues that kind of compile on themselves. I worry that by sharing my issues, some people, like some of the ones that I consider my best friends, they would somehow not like me anymore, and we would just stop talking altogether, which hasn't happened up to this point, and I don't really think it would. Truthfully, if you want to quote like literally any like 15-year-old girl's Instagram caption, that true friends will stay no matter what. Which, gosh, that's really cliche to say out loud. But anyway, and the friends I have are just so wonderful people. And honest, there are times where I wonder, how am I still here? And then I remember that I have good friends. Anyway, number 2 is unstable relationships, and just kind of have to laugh about that one, because the way this explains it can be pretty intense compared to what I have seen in other people and what I've seen in myself. So this says people with BPD tend to have relationships that are intense and short-lived. You may fall in love quickly, believing that each new person is the one who will make you feel whole, only to be quickly disappointed by them. Your relationships either seem perfect or horrible, without any middle ground. Your lovers, friends, family members may feel like they have emotional whiplash as a result of your rapid swings from idealization to devaluation, anger, and hate. I would say, I've just in the last video I discussed how unstable relationship-wise things are. That's kind of why I had the pact with myself, try not to fall for anybody, which obviously hasn't worked since I had the issue during the summer, and I've got what's going on now with October, and I will say that in any of my relationships, whether it was actually ended up being a dating relationship or like friendships, I'm kind of the opposite. I tend to be. If someone and I are really good friends, it's not going to be typically like a super intense kind of thing, and it's definitely not going to be short lived. Like when I get into and other people that I've seen with BPD, when they get into relationships, and this only happens with some people, but when we get into relationships, we do our best to pour basically everything we have into it, whether that means taking time away from what we were doing to talk to that person, or just in a way trying to get to know that person better. Some people with BPD tend to be the opposite of this thing. Now, I can certainly say that I have had at least 2 or 3 relationships, only 2 of them dating, but that have been unstable because of various reasons. Some of them I discussed in the last entry, but for the most part, the friends that I have, or the ones that I talk to on a regular basis, I would say, at least in my opinion, it's a pretty stable relationship, and it's pretty. It'd be hard for it to become just unstable for whatever reason immediately. So number 3, an unclear or shifting self-image. And this says, when you have BPD, your sense of self is typically unstable. Sometimes you may feel really good about yourself, and then other times you hate yourself and even view yourself as evil. You probably don't have a clear idea of who you are or what you want in life. As a result, you may frequently change jobs, friends, lovers, religion, values, goals, or even your sexual identity. So that is, number 3 is definitely one that can be any level with any kind of person. And this kind of, let me just double check really quickly. This number 3 kind of coincides with number 6, which is just extreme emotional states. But I will say, like at this point, number 3 with the unclear shifting self-image, it's definitely a non-issue at this point for me. It was definitely really bad when I was younger, but it had to do with mainly the fact I was, one, very young when it happened. I say very young, I'm only 18 now, and it was like when I was 12. But it had to do with like the fact that I was still pretty young, still very immature, and bullying and public school crap. Anyway, but at this point, I mean, I know what my overall goal is in life. I mean, I'm a pilot right now. I'm literally the reason why I'm here is to get a degree and to get my flight ratings, and then either go airlines or go military, and then eventually become an astronaut. That's always been the goal, like career-wise, and I don't see that changing drastically anytime soon. And on the point of, I don't have a clear idea of who I am. I mean, that one's definitely a bit odd, because it comes down to, it really comes down to how I think about myself. And honestly, if I'm thinking about something, 1, I tend to overthink, and 2, it ends up never being about me. I'm always stressing about something else besides my needs. I mean, so much so that I have gone unintentionally. So for one of the people who will probably see this, it was completely unintentional, so don't worry about me. Um, but I would unintentionally just stop eating. I did it more often. I was like a few years ago, where I would just have days, or I say days, like two or so days where I just wouldn't eat because I just wasn't hungry, or um, I just didn't feel like I needed to, which doesn't really truthfully apply in this situation because it's not really part of my self image. Um, but it's definitely contributed to the whole overall self image that I have of myself. Um, Number four, I'll go through really quickly because it's impulsive and self destructive behaviors. I am not a person who goes off of just blind impulse. If for the most part, I will say I have had some instances where, not recently, but in the past, where I would just do something regardless of what the consequences were. But these days, I'm far more calculated in the way I do things. And five is self harm. I'm not even going to touch that because it hasn't been an issue. Number six is probably where my symptoms are the strongest. It's extreme emotional swings. So this says unstable emotions and moods are common with BPD. One moment you may feel happy, the next despondent. Little things that other people brush off can send you into an emotional tailspin. These mood swings are intense, but they tend to pass very quickly, unlike the emotional swings of depression or bipolar disorder. And they usually last for a few minutes or a few hours. And that one plays into number seven as well, which we'll get to. But like anyone who I've talked about this with knows that number six is just the way I live life. But mine is definitely a weird version of this. Like I have had it where, and I'll use Saturday as an example in just a minute. But I haven't had it where it may take a few days for me to come out of an up and down. Typically, I saw this in a video recently. Typically, with people with BPD, they describe their emotional journeys as a roller coaster. It's constantly up and down, and I can definitely say that's the fact. Depending on what's going on in a day, like really anything could happen. Whether it's someone said something weird, or someone just looked at me funny way, which hasn't been an issue really, but sometimes it can have really positive or negative effects. And I'll use the example of Saturday. We had the cadet ball, and that morning or the day before wasn't a great day. So I was kind of in a neutral mood. I wasn't upset. I wasn't sad, but I also wasn't like happy. Like I know I need to be. But then I got up Saturday morning, and it was a complete 180. Like I was happy to the point of being giddy, honestly. And the drive up, I sang songs far more enthusiastically than I would in the car when I'm by myself. Got there, had a lot of fun, and the weird thing was I was the one who did the music. I was DJing for the dancing portion, and that may have played into this a little bit. But the way the music went, we had a bunch of line dances, and I think we only ended up playing 2 slow dances. I was able to dance to one of the slow dances, and I did a couple of the line dances. But one of the last songs was supposed to be a slow dance, and as soon as that slow dance started, I don't even remember what the song was, but for whatever reason, my emotional state went from that super high, euphoric, basically to the point of being giddy, to I can literally feel like a roller coaster is going down a track, like it's just straight down, and it started off as a very slow curve, so like I was up at the top of the plateau, and it was just kind of slowly going down, but then when I got in the car to actually go home, it just dropped off, and I mean that's happened before, but that was within a span of an hour, like between the end of that event and or by the time that I could feel it starting, at that next to last song, and by the time I got in the car, that was less than an hour's worth of time, which is, I mean, typical for someone with BPD, because I mean, it just switches very quickly, and but there are some times where it takes days to get out of a lull. Um, and it's, I can say for sure it's different than bipolar disorder, because with bipolar disorder you may spend days in a euphoric state, and you may then spend days in a lull state. My issue is I will spend maybe a day or a day and a half at a max in a very happy, or I've only had like 2 euphoric states since I've noticed the issues. But I may like have 1 or 2 happy days where I'm happy the whole day, and then I may have a neutral day in between, and then I can spend like a week in a lull. And then they've gotten longer as it's progressed, which then kind of transitions to number 7 with chronic feelings of emptiness. In those lulls, it's not a state of I'm upset about something. Like the day could have been going completely fine, and I could still be just my emotion just in the drain. This says people with BPD often talk about feeling empty as if there's a hole or void inside them. At its most extreme, you may feel as if you are nothing or nobody. This feeling is uncomfortable, and you may try to fill the void with objects and things, but nothing ever feels truly satisfying. Mine definitely has not been extreme, but it's definitely, there are some days where it has been detrimental. I will say what was it, just Thursday? Thursday I had some finals, and that was a really bad day, because the day before I was in a very neutral state, but for whatever reason that Thursday was bad, and right now I don't know how I did on my first final that day. I can tell it probably wasn't great. The second final I took, I got a 92.5, which definitely boosted my mood. But like I just started that day with just completely empty, and it was completely detrimental because I could not focus. Like I could not focus on taking a final exam in college because it was just so empty. So it hasn't been super extreme, but it's definitely been something I've had to work around at this point. I'll skip over 8. It's explosive anger. Again, anyone who knows me, unless it's something severe, I don't get super angry. I've only been super angry in like 2 or 3 instances in the past 5 to 10 years, honestly. And when I say angry, I mean like genuinely angry, like to the point of like I'm livid, I'm fuming, and one of those happened at the 2018 encampment, which was what happened. Like it was completely shouldn't have set me off in the way that it did, but it just completely set me off, and it was definitely an odd experience with that one. But I just don't get angry. If something upsets me, I just get flustered, or I just become annoyed. I don't really become angry. And then number 9 is feeling suspicious or out of touch with reality. So this says people with BPD often struggle with paranoia or suspicious thoughts about others' motives. When under stress, you may even lose touch with reality, an experience known as dissociation. You may feel foggy, spaced out, or as if you are outside your own body. I would love to say I've never felt dissociation before, but I have unintentionally, it's unintentional, you can't really control when you dissociate. But I've had at least 1 or 2 instances where, like picture you're playing a third-person video game, and you are moving around as if, think about this, trying to play like in virtual reality. You're playing as in first-person view, as if you are that character. Try and play a virtual reality game where you have to move your body to move the character, but you're playing in third person. That's a very weird way of explaining it, but I have had it happen at least twice, where I would get up to go do something, and for whatever reason, I was kind of spaced out, and when I would try to get up and move, it felt like my emotions were lagged, if that makes any sense. Like I would tell myself, oh, I need to go this way, and it would take about a half second or so before I even started moving. Um, and I'm not even going to talk about spacing out because it happens so often. It is, it's annoying, honestly, kind of, because it kind of plays into the fact I don't have great memory, or I don't have great short term memory. Long term, long term memory is fine. I mean, I can spit off random facts about really random stuff, but I have had several instances recently, like within the past week, where I would I'd be talking about something and I would just completely forget what I was talking about as I'm talking about it. So, like, given an instance, like if I'm like even with this article sitting in front of me, I could be reading through the article and trying to talk about it, and I just forget what I'm talking about. I just end up scrolling through the article like, what am I talking about? And I've had that happen. Not, it's not frequent enough that it's become an issue, but it's definitely become an annoyance at this point. Um, like it only happens It's only happened like 3 times this week, which is significantly more than it happens normally. But that's because I was around a lot of people this past week, or within this past week, which I'm normally not because I'm either sitting at my computer doing schoolwork or I'm in class doing schoolwork, or flying, which is one of few things that make one of few things that help aid in another point I'll make in just a minute. Um, but this does go on to say that sometimes or most of the time, borderline personality disorder is rarely diagnosed on its own. So for most people who actually get diagnosed with BPD, either have some type of depression or a bipolar disorder, or they have issues with substance abuse, eating disorders, or anxiety disorders. Um, and a lot of the time, borderline personality disorder isn't known a bunch about. So typically, if you're trying to if you're trying to get like treatment for BPD, it's typically because you have something else. They're treating it, and it ends up coinciding, kind of helping each other out. And mind you, I'm saying all these things. I have not been officially diagnosed, um, nor do I plan on trying to figure out if I've been officially diagnosed, because it has not become my symptoms have not become enough of an issue that they are detrimental to my work yet. And I say yet because the way things are going, it may be at some point. And basically, the way they're explaining it, there's many complex things that are happening within your brain when you have BPD, but basically, it just means your brain is on high alert for literally everything. Like if in your mind you had a bunch of switches that control different portions, your emotional switch is almost always on because it's constantly changing. Your mood tends to change very rapidly as well, so that switch is flipped. And I mean, depending on how drastic you get, it can like flick all the switches and you just go into overload. But we'll say I just saw this. Some of the self help tips that this article gives. One is calm the emotional storm. 2, learn to control your impulsivity and tolerate distress. And 3, improve your interpersonal skills. And unfortunately for me, none of those actually help because I've tried number 1, which is calm the emotional storm, and no. And then 3, I mean, the fact that I'm making these and I am going to send them to some people kind of says that, I mean, I don't have an issue with that. Gosh, just a minute. This video is going to be really long. I'm already at 29 and a half minutes. Anyway, but I can say that another issue, and I'll put this article away at this point because this is just me ad-libbing it. There are some times where I do feel like it's not just BPD that's my issue. I do feel like there are some days where, like, if I'm in a lull, if it gets worse, it becomes it seems like a depressive episode, because such a low point that it feels impossible to get out of. And this kind of falls into what I said in the last video: find someone or something that's your antidote. And I mean, I have a couple. Like, I can for sure say I've got a couple friends who have helped out tremendously. And then I listen to music, and sometimes a combination of those things ends up being what I need for a certain period. But that becomes, I will say, part of the reason why I started a while ago to even make music was because I was in the middle of a very long lull in like just an emotional state. And I just kind of picked up my iPad, went to GarageBand, and started playing around with buttons before something sounded decent. And I mean, it ended up that I have stuff on places, but nobody listens to it, which is fine. I didn't release it in the attempt of making a career out of it, which there's so much I'd have to do to even begin to try and make a career out of it. But anyway, that's a tangent. But what it really comes down to, for me, it has yet to become an issue to the point that it's detrimental to how I work, how I function. I'm almost always busy, which is part of the reason why my first two relationships didn't end up turning out, just because I'm constantly busy. I've been busy for a very long time, and in many, many ways. And even now, I'm in the middle of finals week. And then, tomorrow at 10:30, I have a final, which is my last final for the semester. So think about last final of the decade. Anyway, but I've got that final at 10:30 to 12:30, and as soon as it's done, I leave to go back home for an awards night, where since I'm a cadet commander of SC-113, I've got to be there, and I've got to help hand out awards. Wednesday, I have to drive back up here because on Thursday I have a flight, and on Friday I have a flight, and then on Saturday we've got another event, and then the next week I've got something Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then that Monday, and then you get Christmas, and then I've got a conference I've got to go to that next weekend, and then we're at the new year at that point. I'm just constantly busy, even on a break. I'm constantly busy, and all of it kind of plays into that idea. It hasn't become disruptive yet. It hasn't become disruptive to the point that it completely negates me trying to work on something. I have had a paper I had to turn in a while ago. Most of the work that I did on it, I had to do, even though I was in the middle of one of the deepest lows I've been in at that point. And I just had to get through it. I didn't make a great grade on it because I couldn't give my full mind to it. I couldn't actually focus on it. But I haven't gone for a diagnosis. I haven't gone for trying to get treatment options because it hasn't been disruptive yet. And honestly, there are some people who will probably, if anyone besides the few I will send it to ever see this, there'll probably be people who are like, man, just go get it checked out at least. But that kind of plays into my constant, worrying, constantly stressed out. I do worry what happens if I get a positive result of, oh yeah, you've got BPD, plus you've got whatever else. And that's just something that I don't know that I'll be able to work around if it is the case. So right now, since it's not completely detrimental, I'm not going to work around it, or I'm not going to make myself have to work around it, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that was that was a now 35-minute long rant about a mental disorder. So, well, it's a personality disorder. Sorry, it's not a mental disorder. People, medical professionals will get very angry if you call it a mental disorder. It's a personality disorder, which is weird because most of the people I know with my type personality, they have a lot of the same issues, which is weird. It's one of the reasons why I don't like personality tests. Because if you take a personality test, for me, I get 2 answers. I think it's ENSF and ENS or ENFP. It's basically the same letters except for one, and it's right at the end of it. And one is a very cheerful person, and the other is a very logical thinker. And then you throw in a personality disorder right in the middle of it, which means my already double categorized personality now has an issue. And yeah, anyway, that was by the time I probably finish this recording, it'll be a nearly 40-minute long rant that I honestly feel bad for whoever decides to sit through this whole thing, because 40 minutes by the time I finish is a long time. Anyway, that's journal entry number 2. Hopefully I can be in just as good of a mood for number 3 whenever I record it. It's only been like 2 days since the last one, so hopefully I'll have a chance to record another one soon. And it may just be me explaining more things, because my life hasn't begun. My life this month hasn't really been eventful yet. I've been busy, but it hasn't been eventful since it's only the 9th. Hopefully, once events start happening, there may be some things I have to report on. Anyway, that's number 2, and if anyone will actually follow this, I guess, series, see you in the next one. Bye.